Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a level 100 Arcane dexterity build. So this is going to be focusing on the Bloody Helice, which did get a slight buff in patch 1.07. The tracking for the weapon art is now a little bit better, so the follow-up heavy attacks track a little bit better and are more likely to land. We're going to be running this build with 50 Vigor, which is decent for the level 100 damage output range, and then 25 Endurance, which is going to allow us to wield this weapon and our armor, and then 16 points in Strength, which is necessary for this weapon, 20 points in Dexterity, which 19 of those are necessary for wielding this weapon, and then everything else in Arcane, so that's going to be 40 points in Arcane. And then we're going to be using Hasso's Helm, as well as the Tree Sentinel armor for everything else, and that's going to give us 104 poise with the Bullgoat Talisman. We're also going to be using Erdtree's Favor +2, which is going to boost our HP, stamina, and equip load, and then we're going to have Shard of Alexander as well as the Spear Talisman, and these two together are going to be really useful when we go for the heavy follow-up in our Ash of War, which comes out as a thrust, so that means we get the Shard of Alexander bonus when we perform the heavy attack, as well as the Spear Talisman bonus if our opponent is mid-attack. We get that extra counter damage. So those two together can result in really high damage output for the follow-up heavy in the Ash of War. As for the tiers in our mixed physic, we're going to be using the Dexterity Knot tier as well as the Crimson Bubble tier. I would say the Dexterity Knot is pretty optional since the scaling for Dexterity is not great. I think I got around 20 AR bonus from this tier. So you could really mix it up, use whatever you'd like. I think something to lower your equip load or make your dodge rolls a little bit better would also be interesting. A boost to your poise might not be a bad idea either. Or the tier that converts damage into HP. That could also be useful for a short time, but for me, I just kind of wanted to keep it straightforward with the Dexterity Knot as well as the Crimson Bubble tier. I really enjoyed the moveset for this build. So the Heavy Thrusting Sword class in general has a great moveset. The Running Heavy is extremely strong and great for chase downs. The Jumping Light can frequently be followed up by another light attack, which is really good. And the Ash of War for this is going to be awesome. It goes with a backward spin, so you can change the direction. If you unlock, you can turn around and spin towards your opponent. And then this also comes with a follow-up attack, so you can go for a poke and then another poke and a swipe. And this is really strong too if you want to delay it a little bit. You can frequently just kind of pause between the heavy attacks that you input and just kind of catch your opponent off guard. They might think the animation is completely over and that you're not going to go for a heavy attack, but you'll be able to surprise them with a slight delay with those heavies. So I definitely recommend that. Otherwise, the rest of the moveset is pretty straightforward. I think the running heavies and the jumping lights are probably going to be the most effective aspect of this build. I will also note that the crouching attack does come out pretty quickly, but really lacks range. So it can be a nice way to roll catch your opponent if they roll around you, but if they roll away from you, you'll frequently miss just due to the kind of upward thrust that this gets, which isn't quite as long range as like just a normal poke. So it does come out quickly and is nice for instances like that, but it's not really long range. In the future, I wouldn't mind a change to this weapon class if we got the same like swipe as Great Spears that would come out horizontally, but that might just be a little bit too strong. So we'll see in the future, but for now we've got this upward thrust that is potentially good for roll catching, but is not amazing in terms of range. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build and the moveset, so if you want to go ahead and jump ahead to the invasions, feel free. However, I did want to quickly mention that I am trying to hit a goal of 1,000 subscribers. This way I start getting money back from YouTube, which kind of helps legitimize me doing this more often and allows me to just kind of make content more frequently. So if you do like the channel and you'd be willing to hit subscribe, that would be pretty awesome. Obviously, you can do whatever you want, but yeah, I just wanted to mention that here since I mentioned this in a previous video and saw that the subscribers per view went up a little bit. So yeah, let's just go ahead and jump into the invasions. Alright, so this first invasion we have a 3v1, and here I do try Ironjar Aromatic on this build, which was something that I was interested in trying just because we do get the extra mobility from Dynast's Finesse, the Ash of War for this weapon, and that was one of my main criticisms of Ironjar Aromatic, is that you don't really have too much mobility when you use it, and that can be a big issue, and that it's also not really great for all circumstances. So I made a video recently and just kind of talked about that in detail, and I can link that in the description, but using Dynast Finesse is a great way to kind of buff Ironjar Aromatic and give it a little bit more mobility. And there you can see that I was able to kind of take care of that 3v1 with not too much of an issue. Next up we have a 2v1, and this one I kind of just wanted to show off because of that backstab in the beginning. So typically I run away from Dragon Breath, but in this invasion I decided I might just go for it and try a backstab on the person with Rot Breath, and it ended up being really effective. They aren't able to turn that quickly, especially when you're that close to them. So if you can get up close and then pretty much just strafe around the Rot Breath and go for a backstab, at least based on this invasion, it seems like it works. It's not something I've tried too often since, but I definitely kind of like that option as a way to counter Dragon Breath, because it is something that's strong but was nerfed in patch 1.07. Next up we have a 3v1, and this is going to be a great example of showcasing how the Ash of War Dynast Finesse works well with the Shard of Alexander and the Spear Talisman. So in this invasion I'm getting a lot of AoE sent my way between Rivers of Blood and then that giant stone that's being tossed my way. Fortunately the host is a little bit chill in terms of just not applying too much pressure. They try to get some ice build up on me there, but it doesn't land at all. I am trying to avoid these Lion Claw attacks that the other Phantom is sending my way, but it ends up being okay. So here we can see the first time that Dynast Finesse is super useful, and that's when they go for a jumping attack and I go for the Ash of War, dodge the jumping attack, and then get the counter damage as well as the Shard of Alexander with the follow-up heavy. So that ended up being really useful in that moment, and takes care of the first Phantom, and that's going to be kind of a theme throughout the showcase of this build, is just utilizing those two talismans together and really upping your damage output, especially if you can get off all 3 hits. You're going to be doing tons of damage, and if the rot also or the bleed also procs in the process, you're going to be, you know, I think I've hit close to 1500 in a single combo between the rot and the bleed. So, or the just damage output and the bleed. Sorry, there's a lot of rot on screen, so it's kind of on my brain. But yeah, so there we can see I get a little bit of damage on the Phantom. I go for the Frost proc because this will give me a little bit of extra damage output. And then here again, I go for the Ash of War. And I missed that first lunge, or it's a little bit delayed, I'm not entirely sure. But they were mid Ash of War during that attack, so I got the counter damage, and then here we can just see the host has no HP, but I get the counter damage with the Ash of War again. So that's 3 people kind of being wrecked just because of the Spear Talisman and the Shard of Alexander together. Next up we have a 2v1, and I start off by trying to bait them down with the Jar Cannon and miss by a couple inches with the projectile there. And so I decide to rush for the mage here in the back, just because I think that they're going to be a problem if I don't take care of them quickly. And here they've got Moonveil, so I'm able to Dynast Finesse that and then go for the full heavy combo with the Ash of War, and the swipe ends up taking them out. And then next up, the host is just going after me with a greatsword, and they only really get the 1 hit on me while I was attacking the Phantom. Otherwise, I just am able to kind of dodge everything and get them with the heavy thrusting sword, which is just amazing in one-on-one situations, especially if you're going against a heavy weapon with lots of recovery frames. Next up, I go for a backstab in this invasion, and I was really confident that that was going to land, but they were able to roll out of it in time, so I'm not 100% sure on our connection, but it looked like a good opportunity. And this invasion was really interesting. It started out fairly normal. You have a Rune Arced Host in Bulgoat, which does kind of showcase the extra poise damage that the heavy thrusting sword class gets. I'm able to stance break this Bulgoat wearing host quite often, and you know, I'm kind of just looking for opportunities, trying to space things and, you know, get off damage when I can. And then this other invader comes in, and I try to signify to them that we're on the same team, but it seems like they're playing under the assumption that they're from the Mound Maker's Covenant, which is a covenant in Dark Souls 3 where you can either decide to attack co-invaders or phantoms. It's kind of like a free-for-all covenant. However, this covenant does not exist in Elden Ring, so I'm not really sure what this invader is doing. So eventually, when it's clear that they are going to try to kill me, I start putting some damage in on them. And it's nice, though, because the hosts and the phantoms don't seem to be totally sure that the co-invader is actually on their side. So they end up hitting them with some damage in the process, and that helps my job a little bit. But they kind of go back and forth on whether or not they want to actually hurt this co-invader. They seem to have identified me as like a greater threat, and which makes sense because the co-invader is, you know, attacking me as well. So I have kind of everybody ganging up on me here. I also will be using the rope volcano pots. In one of my earlier videos, somebody in the comments mentioned that they're a great way to kind of zone people and just keep people out of certain spaces. So I use one there to kind of discourage them from running up this stairwell. The Phantom pulls out a jar cannon, which is not a great short range weapon, and you can see there that their ballista just kind of goes right through me, and that allows me to end up in a chase down with them where I get the kill. So that turns it into a 2v1 again, which makes things quite a bit easier. And I'm not really sure what's going on here. I'm not sure if the co-invader meant to hit the host or not, but it complicates things a little bit more. I almost land a final blow on the host there, but they are able to stun lock me with the greatsword, so that ends up being effective. And then I hop down and regroup. There I get the counter damage on both of them. That's something that's nice to note about this weapon, is that you can hit two people at the same time. The range of the weapon is just like long enough to go through multiple people, so that's pretty cool, even though like the hitbox for it is rather narrow. So in certain circumstances, it can be useful. I do try to back off a little bit and see if the co-invader and the host will fight it out a little bit. They don't seem interested in doing that, so I go and start attacking the host again. And then the co-invader hops back down, and they start going for a lot of fully charged heavies. Which ends up being really predictable. I would say if you don't land your fully charged heavy like the first 2 times, you should probably stop, because it kind of allows me to just kind of get turn and burns with the heavy thrusting swords running heavy. So there they go for the fully charged heavy again, and I, you know, get the running heavy on it. And they kind of just keep going for it. So I'm not really sure what was going through their mind. I'm not sure if they were just trying to be a distraction at this point, a little bit of a nuisance. Either way, it ended up being okay. I get the bleed proc on them there, and I think at this point they're out of health. So I roll out here trying not to get blendered with the last kind of like half health that I get, and then the host ends up killing the co-invader, which I thought was just kind of the cherry on top for this invasion. So I begin to chase down the host here now that it's just a one-on-one situation. I'm pretty confident that this is going to be winnable. Definitely throughout the invasion, I was a little bit concerned. Host and Bull Goat and a Phantom that is doing a decent amount of damage with their jumping Ultra Greatsword attacks is definitely scary. There also wasn't much PvE to rely on, and then having the co-invader come in and start going after me was a little bit concerning. Typically, co-invaders are a little bit better at PvP than just regular co-operators, so when you have one that's coming after you, it can be a little bit scary, but we were able to get through all of them and then finally take out the host, which felt pretty good. Next up, we have a real quick 2v1. This is pretty funny. They were both using the Mimic Veil, so I had no idea where they were, and I was about to sever out, just pretty sure that they were in some spot that I didn't know about that was like for AFK farming, but then they decided to hop out at the last second, which was probably not a good move. So I'm able to kill the Phantom pretty quick, and then I start putting pretty good damage on the host here. They're using Hoarfrost Stomp, which is kind of funny. You don't really see that too often. And then there I was 100% sure that they were going to fall off the ledge, but they didn't fall to their death. So I guess I was right about them falling off a ledge, but I wasn't expecting them to survive it. And then I just kind of go for a little bit of a chase down here. I thought the kind of story of this was funny, but the skill of my opponents wasn't crazy high or anything. But I would say if you are successfully using a Mimic Veil to hide from an invader, definitely try to wait it out, or don't. I mean, it makes my job easier if you don't use that Mimic Veil for too long, but I just thought that was kind of interesting here, and was happy to see that there's not some new AFK spot that I didn't know about. Next up, we do have another invasion with Hoarfrost Stomp, and that's kind of interesting as an approach, especially since I put on the Ironjar Aromatic. And here you can see that the Dynast Finesse is helpful. I end up using it to try to turn around, and it's worth noting that you can't get the full 180, so it's not the same as a reverse backstep in terms of the tracking with the follow-up. And I thought this was a 2v1, but then we do have somebody hopping out in the corner, getting a surprise attack on me, but the Ironjar Aromatic is negating most of the physical damage that's coming my way, so I don't have to worry about it too much. Also, not being likely to be stun locked makes it really nice, because if you just keep an eye on your health, you can stop whatever you're doing and heal while everybody's still swinging at you. So I'm able to kill a phantom and a host while using Ironjar Aromatic pretty effectively, and then there I think I would have finished off the last phantom, but the invasion ends. So that was just kind of another fun use of it. I would say, you know, pick your battles for where you want to use Ironjar Aromatic. If you've got aggressive players not using magic and not using lightning, it's gonna be a great option. You'll probably be able to get off quite a bit of damage pretty quick. And then using something like Dynast Finesse or Bloodhound Step or Quick Step allows you to just kind of get that mobility back that you lack from the kind of innate nature of the perfume. So here I'm able to get off a nice couple combos and roll catch chains with just the range of this weapon. Super useful for that, where you can just kind of keep pressuring, and if their roll timing is off or anything, you're likely to do pretty well with it. And then there you can see I got a kind of falling throw with the freezing pot that ends up hitting that phantom, which is pretty nice. They end up running. I suggest that you kind of stay and protect the host if that's what's going on, but you know, that's all right. And then here they do land the Ash of War, which ends up making it so I can't heal, but I am still trying to at least pressure them a little bit. I throw another freezing pot their way. The damage with freezing pots is really lackluster if you have already frostbitten them. Most of the damage you get with them is from the frostbite, so that probably wasn't the right move. I should have switched to a different projectile. If I was going to be throwing something their way, maybe a lightning pot would have been better. But I am able to kind of hide with the PvE and just regroup until I'm able to heal again. And once I have a little bit more health, I can start chasing down this phantom with the winged scythe. And that ends up working out pretty well. I do get hit with damage again, and the Ash of War, the startup for that hit me, so I'm not able to heal again. So here I just kind of take advantage of the fact that there's a little bit of PvE hiding in this corner, and it's kind of a nice way to just regroup for a second and wait for the effects of that Winged Scythe Ash of War to wear off. And then once I'm able to heal again, I start going back in for the host. So that's definitely a recommendation in terms of playstyle. If you're not able to heal, just wait it out. I think historically I've been kind of a little bit more aggressive and more interested in just kind of chasing down my opponent regardless of my healing situation. And as I've gotten better at the game, I think just kind of taking a sec to just like regroup and wait for my health to come back is a good way to play, and will result in more wins. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do lately, and just kind of a recommendation that I have in general. And then here you do see the bleed buildup comes into play during the Ash of War follow-up heavy, and that allows me to get like over 700 damage and finish off that host. So that was pretty nice. Next up we have what starts as a 2v1, but a phantom has been summoned in. This was a little bit worrisome to start. I was able to lock onto the phantom before they had fully spawned in, and in some cases you're not able to see them throughout the duration of the invasion. However, in this case, I was able to see them after a little while, so their character model did spawn in. In that time, I was able to take care of one phantom, so you know, it was never a full 3v1 where everybody was attacking simultaneously, but it was kind of a scary moment there, just where I wasn't able to see them. Next up, I did have a kind of nice freezing pot toss where I just kind of hit the doorway as they were rushing in, and that stun locked them and got the frostbite proc on them, so they are going to have lower resistances for a little while, and they are using the Eleanor's Pole Blade Ash of War pretty effectively there. Typically it's not a great Ash of War just because you're stuck in that combo for so long and it's pretty predictable, but they are using it kind of at good times and with the chaos of the host attacking me, so I think they're doing a good job of kind of taking advantage of my aggression. So I start to back off and play a little bit more passively against them just because I don't want to get caught between two bleed weapons and get killed. I'm going for Dynast Finesse maybe a little bit more than I should. I really wanted to figure out the timing of when to use the follow-up in relation to Eleanor's Pole Blade, and I think I do a little bit later, but it took me a minute just because the range and the movement of Dynast Finesse is a little chaotic, and then the range of the movement of the Eleanora Pole Blade Ash of War is also chaotic. So figuring out when the timing would work where I would be able to follow up with a heavy attack while they would be stuck in their animation was a little bit kind of time consuming, and I lost some health in the process. But that's something I do recommend for invasions too. Like, if you have a feeling that you can pull something off that might be an obscure combo or just kind of an interesting way to fight, I definitely recommend going for that and trying to learn in the process, because even if you lose that invasion, I think the knowledge you gain is pretty useful for the future. So there I end up killing the Phantom and then following up the host with the Ash of War, and it ends up being pretty effective there. But I think I did learn something in that invasion, even though it wasn't successful in terms of damage output on the spot. So that's just kind of a recommendation in terms of approach for trying new stuff. Next up, we have an invasion where the tracking on this kind of shows to be really good. The Winged Scythe Ash of War has the player fully in the air, which means that they are mid-attack, so the Spear Talisman comes into play, but I am still able to hit them with the follow-up heavy of the Ash of War. So that improved tracking that we got in 1.07 is pretty sweet, and even applies to that Winged Scythe Ash of War. And the Shard of Alexander was also helpful in that moment, paired with the Spear Talisman. So I just wanted to showcase that because tracking on this has changed, and having the vertical tracking as well as horizontal tracking is pretty cool. And that ends up kind of being the determining factor for winning that invasion. Next up, we have a 3v1, and this one I determined would be a good opportunity to use the Ironjar Aromatic. So I see a lot of melee weapons. I don't really see any wizards in the group, and they seem like they might be kind of aggressive. So I go ahead and put that on, and then start taking advantage of the Dynast Finesse. I get around 1400 damage from that Ash of War, which ends up being very solid. I also was a little bit worried about the lightning bolts that were coming my way. It was both making it difficult to see, as well as hitting me for full damage, because Ironjar Aromatic doesn't do anything against lightning. So I was a little bit worried there, but I do have the extra poise and kind of damage negation to get in a bunch of heals, which means I'm able to kind of come up and win this invasion. And then here you can see those spears are just bouncing off of me, adding to their recovery frames and allowing me to use Dynast Finesse to just come in and take care of them. Next up, we have a 2v1 in the Hero's Grave area, or one of those similar dungeons. And this is always a place that I don't really like invading, especially if you're stuck in one of these areas. If you have something that's like a big AoE type Ash of War, like Waves of Darkness or Horlu's Earthshaker, you're probably going to do pretty well. But if you have something that's kind of focused in terms of its damage output, like a heavy thrusting sword, you're not going to be doing as well. But here I just try to stay full health, so that if I get hit by the chariot, I'll be okay, and I'm able to take care of the Phantom and then guard break the host. And then here I go for a roped fire pot wake up, which I found to be pretty useful in this scenario because they didn't really have anywhere to go. So I definitely want to incorporate the roped pots more into my builds. Somebody in the comments recently mentioned that that's like a good way to kind of up your game, and can be pretty fun in terms of zoning or just getting a little bit of extra damage with your wake up. So I'll definitely try to do that more and kind of have fun with it. Next up, we have a 2v1 where we have somebody with the Blight Scythe, the Eclipse Shuttles, I believe, and then we have somebody with Moonlight Greatsword, and that can be really scary, especially if you have overleveled Phantoms using it. The damage output can be pretty nutty, and it did get a buff where it's a little bit faster now. So that was a little bit scary, but then I'm able to get a couple good hits in and use the follow-up with Dynast Finesse to finish off the Phantom there. So here I have an invasion that starts out pretty poorly. I'm getting hit with Rivers of Blood, and then the dungeon's trap that shoots fire at you gets me for almost half my health. So I take a second to regroup here and pull out the Jar Cannon, and I found that to be a useful way to get those pillars down. A bow is probably faster in terms of how quickly you can switch back to your main weapon, but I don't typically carry a bow on my builds. Using a great bow is something that I'm interested in, incorporating. I feel like the jar cannon was all the rage at the beginning of Elden Ring, but the great bow is a little bit more popular now, and I would like to give it a try, maybe incorporate the Rain of Arrows, Ash of War. I do almost kill them both with the Ash of War. I think it was hitting for around 1400 damage, also getting some blood loss buildup on the host and the phantom, but it wasn't quite enough. They are playing pretty passively here. I think they saw that they were able to get me with the fire damage at the beginning and then wanted to kind of replicate that. So I, kind of go after them, but I'm very mindful of where the fire is coming out and whether or not the pillar is up. So it does come back up and I get some blood loss, which is a little bit scary. I think I dodged the actual damage for it, but had some of the follow-up hits hit me, so I get pretty close to death there, but I think the phantom's out of health, so I come in for a running heavy, miss my crouching attack. That's one of the issues with the range, but then go for the follow-up with the fan daggers, and that is enough to finish off the phantom, and then it's just a one-on-one, and I feel pretty confident I'll be okay. So that was kind of an interesting layout for where I was, and just kind of navigating the giant column that shoots fire from it. I feel like that can really work in your favor or work against you depending on how you use it. So next up we have a 2v1. We have the Vike Spear taking quite a bit of space away. It's definitely a good way to zone in small areas. So I'm trying to be mindful of that, trying to make sure that my madness proc doesn't get too high. And I'm also trying to utilize my Ash of War as much as I can, just because I feel like it's good in terms of delivering a lot of damage, and especially with the Spear Talisman getting that counter damage. So I'm able to get the phantom down almost to death, but then they do have the space to recover and heal once or twice. So it kind of is a reset to neutral here in just a second. I'm able to get some extra health, and I kind of back off and am pretty cognizant of where my madness bar is at. I don't want to get killed. That was a great play by the phantom, I think, to use the madness snipe on me just to give me that extra madness buildup. And here it's almost full, so I use my last madness blouse to get rid of that. And then they go for the madness howl, which is kind of funny. Like, it's difficult to land that. And then I do most of the damage there, but then hit the extra 2 damage with the fan dagger, which I pretty much have been using since the beginning of Elden Ring. I feel like in invasion scenarios, you really just want to have fan daggers on hand because they can finish off kills that you just don't have the space to get to. So that was kind of a useful way to do that. I ended up getting the backstab on the Ash of War, and then the phantom kind of misplays, thinking they're going to kill me with their jumping attack, but I actually get the fan dagger out in that scenario as well to trade with them. Even though they get the madness proc, it wasn't enough to finish me off. So that ended up being pretty useful. Next up we have a 2v1. We have the magma worm blade that is pretty cool. I like the Ash of War on it quite a bit. And then we also have a moon veil. So I'm trying to be wary of that. We also have, I forget what this spell is called, but it kind of has the same tracking that Stars of Ruin had, and is fairly similar to Stars of Ruin before it was patched to not be strafable. And that's a change I'd love to see for this particular spell. I think making it strafable would be a really nice improvement to the game if you have somebody that's just sending that spell your way the whole time. Functionally, it's not so different from the old Stars of Ruin. So I feel like if they felt that Stars of Ruin was a little bit too powerful in that department, I think it would make sense for them to make that change for that particular spell. So we'll see, but that's just a change that I wouldn't mind seeing in future patches. But I'm not sure. From Software is very cognizant of PvP, so we'll see what happens. I am able to get the bleed proc on the phantom, and then the host is going for the PvE. Sometimes I like to give people a little bit of space to recover if it's just a one-on-one situation. You can see that I'm not really pressuring here, even though they're low on health. So I let them get a heal in. Sometimes this definitely kind of bites me, where I let the host kind of heal and recover and turn it into a more fair one-on-one, and then blues get summoned into the world, and I end up kind of regretting it. But you know, I feel like it makes for more interesting invasions. And then there, something funny kind of happened where I landed the guard break in the riposte, but then the body started getting back up on its own. So that kind of scared me. I wondered if they had like 1 HP left, but it just seemed to be some weird animation. Next up, we have a phantom that's trying to kill this snail, which is what spawns in all these wolves. So if you are in this area, you do want to kill the snails first. That person had the right idea, but they were kind of ignoring me, which meant it turned into a one-on-one with the host. Here they have a colossal sword and they go for giant hunt, but Dynast Finesse ends up, you know, being the way to completely dodge that, and then the follow-up damage is pretty huge. It was over 1,000, so that ends up being pretty solid, and then it also gave me enough blood build up to proc bleed on the last attack. Next up, we have just a great example of how useful heavy thrusting swords are for roll catch potential and just chase down. So that first phantom got hit by everything without hitting me once, and that was awesome. Just as, you know, high pressure, high blood loss build up, and I'm able to kill them with very little difficulty. And then next up, we have another chase down. Obviously, they weren't working well as a team, and we have a host that isn't super optimized for PvP. In just a moment, you'll see that they are fat rolling, and I think they're doing some weapon swaps or something in their inventory. They're not really going for things very well, but here I'm able to kind of roll the follow-up with the Radon Sword's Ash of War, get the backstab for most of their health, and then finish them off with the extra 7 damage with fan daggers. So that was kind of just a good way to showcase the chase down potential for this weapon, as well as the timing that you'd want to use for punishing the Ash of War that comes with the Radon swords. If you delay your roll a little bit with the follow-up attack at the end of Radon's swords Ash of War animation, I think you'll typically be in a good spot to grab the backstab, especially if you roll towards them. I just definitely recommend delaying your roll a little bit, because the follow-up attack always kind of surprises me with how slowly it comes out. There was a good example just there of how the tracking isn't a full 180, so I tried to kind of pop out with the reverse Ash of War and go towards my opponent and then hit them up with the follow-up. I'm not able to grab that, but then this host kind of runs back to the site of grace and just gets demolished because they aren't playing anymore. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate everybody's support lately, and if you'd like to see anything particularly new, feel free to let me know. So yeah, thanks so much, and I hope you have a good one.